South Sudan, of course, the Eastern Africa region. So I'm the program officer for Eastern Africa. So a little bit of introduction. We are going to discuss, about the tools for, for digital security, which our two organizations, Policy and Paradigm Initiative, have developed, and which we think will, transform the manner in which we take care of ourselves online. And before we delve into the discussion around the tools, I'm going to introduce Paradigm Initiative, and then I will invite Ganeta Cheng to introduce the policy, and then we'll proceed to the discussion on the tools. So Paradigm Initiative is an organization which originally began in Nigeria, working on digital rights and digital inclusion. And our work has expanded so far into various regions in Africa. So we have the Eastern Africa office in Nairobi. We have the Southern Africa office in Lusaka, Zambia, where my colleague Bulanda Nkowani is working from. We also have our office in charge of Anglophone Africa and also Francophone Africa. We also have an office in Cameroon. We have an office in Kano, in Abuja, in Lagos. So we are spread across the continent, and of course, with plans of expansion soon to other regions where we are not working. So we work specifically on digital rights and digital inclusion as an organization, a social enterprise, and our goal as Paradigm Initiative is to see an Africa whereby underserved populations are able to use the internet and the Internet of Things to turn around their lives and turn around the economy of the continent. So taking advantage of the internet revolution to try to make sure that we in this part of the world are actually reaping the benefits of technology and using it to advance our lives as a people. So that is the goal that we have at Paradigm Initiative. We intend to spread this message across Africa, train young people. We run a program whereby we train young people on software issues, on how to develop things, and we ran that school in Nigeria, and we did open our office in Senegal just last week. We were there for the Paradigm Initiative festival, trying to partner with the government there and the stakeholders, the private sector and civil society, to try to spread the message and the principle that we stand for to other organizations and other regions of Africa. So we are very active in the Southern Africa region, in the Eastern Africa region, in West Africa, and also in Francophone Africa. So last week in Senegal, we did launch our report. We also did, have discussions during the academy that we had organized, training young people about the Paradigm Initiative. And over to you, Ganet, 2 minutes introducing policy, and then you can continue with the conversations on digital safety.
Thank you very much for that in-depth intro on Paradigm. So my name is Ganet Aching. I work at Policy, which is a civic tech organization based in Uganda. We are a collective of feminist technologists working to solve different issues within the digital space. And one of our core focus is on digital security and safety, especially for African women and marginalized communities like the LGBTQ community. And today, on policy side, we have two phenomenal activists who will be joining us to speak on this issue. I think what my colleague Ekai forgot to mention was that first we'll have a presentation on the different digital tools that we have developed over time as a response to different digital security challenges. And then we'll have like a sort of informal discussion on the landscape, the digital security landscape on the continent. And so with us, we have Ms. Cecilia Maundu, who's a phenomenal journalist based in Kenya. And Cecilia is quite an ardent fighter for safer spaces for women online. And then we have another phenomenal person, Ms. Sandra, Kwikiriza, a feminist from Uganda with the years of experience in human rights advocacy and activism, with a special focus on LGBTQ people and women's rights. Cecilia represents her internet organization. I think, Cecilia, you can just drop the link in the chat so that if people want to have a look, they can. And Cecilia works with the Localization Lab, and we recently partnered with them to translate our digital rights, our women's rights work into Kiswahili. So I am very excited to have you all here. And yes, that's on us. Yeah, that's all from our side for now. Okay, I think I'll just start off with our presentation on digital safety. Is that okay? Okay. So I'm just going to start off with digital safety. So digital safety is an interactive fiction game that we at Policy developed with the support of Paradigm Initiative. And so just a primer, what is digital security? So digital security is the protection of one's digital personality as you represent your physical identity in online spaces or in any internet services you're using. And so why did we create a digital security game? So first of all, I think in 2020, Policy did research on online gender-based violence in 5 different African countries. And one of the findings was that while women were experiencing online attacks and different kinds of online attacks and with different varying intensities, one of the biggest challenge for a lot of these women was that they didn't know how to protect themselves in online spaces. They didn't know how to deal with online attacks. And so their response was to leave these online spaces altogether. Yet, as we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic and how we shifted from offline spaces into online spaces, we saw the need for more women to go online, especially for work, social, and economic purposes. But how do they do this when they're being attacked online and they also do not know how to defend themselves? So I think one of the reasons was that identifying that online spaces are under attack for women and LGBTQ people, and that there was an appropriate response for it was teaching people how to navigate different digital security challenges. And then we also wanted to simplify digital security training. So from Nima's experience, she talked about how a lot of digital security training was very niche. It was specifically maybe for journalists, for human rights defenders, for lawyers, but there weren't really that many resources that were available for everyone. And so we wanted to simplify digital security training and make it available for as many people online as possible. And then the third one was the need for feminist self-defense. So one thing about a lot of digital security education programs is that they're not specifically feminist, right? So I could give one example of a feminist issue would be NCII, or the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, which is informally known as revenge porn, right? And so you find that a lot of women love sharing nudes because it empowers them and because it gives them pleasure to do so. And when they share them, sometimes they face NCII, where their nudes are leaked by perhaps intimate partners, or in some cases, you could lose your phone somewhere and somebody picks it up and shares these images. And so this is a feminist issue because feminists believe in body autonomy, right? And we believe that if you want to share nudes, you should do it in a safe space. But a lot of digital security education will not have this feminist nuance to the kind of education they're giving. And so we specifically wanted to give self-defense tips for online spaces that were geared for feminists. And also because feminists are also some of the most attacked women online. And so we created digital safety. Digital safety, it was a play on the word safety. And the tea, like we want to give you the tea or the inside information on digital security. And so we introduced 3 characters, as you can see on my screen. I have Aisha, Dami, and Hoitze. I'm very much attached to these characters because I took part in the development. And so the idea was to have as diverse types of women as we could at the moment. So we have Aisha representing people working for NGO communities on topics deemed as sensitive by the wider society. And so with Aisha's story, we cover digital security challenges unique to people working in such spaces like doxing or pylons, where many people attack you online for something that you've said or written and something that they don't agree with, say maybe abortion rights, right? So how do you deal with that? And then we have Dami. Dami is a business owner from Nigeria. And with Dami's story, we covered cases of digital security breaches that business owners typically face. So you have issues like fraud, people trying to access your devices, malware. How do you manage the reputation of your business on social media? So those are some of the challenges we explored with Dami. And then we have Hoitze. Hoitze is our young student who's still in college, very much fiery, very much loves to engage in online spaces. And with Hoitze, we explored issues like NCII, again, pylons and online harassment, and also just the challenge with dealing with the police when you have a case of online gender-based violence, because I'm sure we have an understanding that there isn't much education on how to handle such cases, especially as police force in different African countries. And so some of the features with this game, we used storylines and scenarios. So we wanted this education to be as accessible as possible and as relatable as possible. Well, as relatable within the limits that we had, because I'm sure we'd not represent every type of woman in this case, but we did want the few scenarios that we have to be relatable. And so we had immersive storylines, that are similar to what a lot of people have faced. And also stories are memorable. Being taught how to make a password that's not easy to hack, it's more interesting when it's done in story form, and it's more memorable. I think I can speak for a lot of us when we were younger, and a lot of lessons were passed to us through storytelling, just for that memorability factor, so that we don't forget the lessons embedded in the stories. And then we have definitions and explanations. So as you go through the game, you come through challenges, you come through terms that maybe you may not be aware of, like deep fakes and deep nudes. And so at every stage where we're introducing something that is a bit complex, we have a breakdown of what this scenario is. And then we also linked other digital security resources. We do acknowledge that the game is not enough. And so we linked other resources by places like Safe Sisters and Tactical Tech on different ways to manage different digital security challenges. And then it's also available in other African languages. So we have it in English, Kiswahili, Luganda, and French. I think the French version will be released later this week. And then we're still working on a Pidgin version and also translation into more and more languages. I think that was the benefit of releasing the game, where people have been reaching out to support us in translating it into different languages and been making more storylines available so that more people are represented. And I think here I can also talk about some of the shortcomings we came across as we made the game. These are lessons that we learned, and we think that anyone who wants to make such a game should also learn. I think one of the mistakes that we made was having having a desktop version live faster than having a mobile version. I think that was just an oversight from us, since we're working on our laptops. I think it just slipped our mind that most African women access the internet through their mobile devices. So I think it's quite important to have something that's first mobile first, and then compatible with other devices later. And also we'd like to have more and more scenarios. We do understand that the game is still limited in the kinds of scenarios that we can have there. And that's why we invite everyone to help us create more scenarios and help us translate it into more languages and make help us to detect, make it more compatible with more and more devices and make it more accessible in situations where people don't have like a lot of data that it can still load. It's a very image-based game. And so those are challenges that we're thinking about. And so you can have a look at the game on www.digitalsafety.com. I will also share the link in the chat. But yes, thank you. I am done with our presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ganet. I think I really like the way you've decided to write the name T, safety. No, it's safety. Very nice. Very good presentation from there, Ganet. Yes, so I will proceed the discussions with the presentation about AITA, which is now. I want to share the document that we're presenting on. Share screen. Could you kindly enable my screen sharing, the host, please? Well, I will speak to the document, but I think it's decent if I share it.
Yes, I have enabled it.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Okay. Yes, I hope you're able to see my screen, right? Okay. Confirm. Ganet, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, okay, yes.
Okay, just to be sure, yeah. So I'm going to speak about AITA for the next 15 minutes or so. Okay, 10 to 15 minutes. I'll make it very brief, and then we will have the discussions proceeding to the panel discussion. So this is the AITA Digital Rights Toolkit, which is a toolkit that we developed as Paradigm Initiative in partnership with, friends at Stanford University, and you can see there it is supported by the Kingdom of the Netherlands Paradigm Initiative, and then Stanford University. So our CEO, Mr. Benga Sesan, did attend a fellowship at the 2020 Stanford Digital Civil Society Fellowship in Stanford, and then this particular toolkit was developed as a result of that particular fellowship. So it is a toolkit which is a bit of information on how you can take care of yourself online, what events exist in the continent that we at the digital rights and digital inclusion world could tap into and learn more from that. So it's you can access this toolkit. Let me just okay, I will type the link down there in the chat at some point, but you can get it at AITA.Africa. So if you type AITA.Africa, you should be able to download a PDF copy of this particular toolkit. So this toolkit was designed with the sole objective of trying to address the issue of you having to take care of yourself online. And all of us who live in Africa, and I dare say in the rest of the world, you always find government trying to follow your footprints online. That's why you always have these reports like, there are this number of people who access the internet or access the cited for something on a particular number of times in a particular year. The government is always watchful, and at some point, especially when you are somebody who is critical of government, or you are an opposition leader, or you're just a blogger, or you are an active citizen trying to tweet and say things, you always find government trying to follow in your footsteps. So how do you take care of yourself if you feel you are at risk online? That is the basic foundation of this particular document. So it is a document which at Paradigm Initiative
think we might have lost Ekai. We can just wait for like, I guess, 2 minutes or yeah. Or maybe Bulanda, you can take over.
I will share my screen again. Sorry. Yes, so this toolkit is, contains information about what events. So maybe I take you through the document so that you can, go and download and read it at your own time. So chapter 1 is about digital rights 101. What are digital rights? Digital rights and human rights. And we usually say at Paradigm Initiative that, rights which are you are entitled as a citizen when you are offline ought to be, online, because nothing changes. You are still a human. You still need the right. So that is that. So chapter 1 addresses digital rights, and then chapter 2 is focused on now the real thing about digital safety and security. How do you take care of yourself online, including passwords, common password attacks. How do you maintain hygiene online? How do you make sure that you have a two-factor authentication? Like if you want to Google to your, if you want to log into your Google account, you always have a pop-in, message on your phone, and then you tap it. So if it is you, obviously Google knows, oh, that must be a guy. So how do you do that? Matters around firewalls, encryption, VPNs, virtual private networks. All those things are contained in this particular document. And then chapter 3 is of much importance to this discussion because we are talking about digital security. So chapter 3 is dedicated to the whole aspect of digital and physical security. How do you, for instance, take care of your laptops in the office or back at home, where we are now working from home? So how do you make sure that, you don't leave your laptop, open and accessible to anyone in a public restaurant, because that is that is contained in the AITA document. How do you circumvent internet shutdowns? And I mean, there are people usually say that it borders a little bit on criminality, which is wrong. We disagree with that. That the government has shut down the internet, and then you have like trying to train people on January 2021 elections. We had that in Burundi on election day. We have that in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region. All these internet shutdowns are there. And I dare say, in the upcoming election in Kenya, which African Charter on Human and People's Rights. On me, maybe government or somebody interfering with the meeting, I don't know. Digital rights and why we have AITA. So we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which essentially says people in the African region ought to have, the things outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then we have very important number 3, the African Declaration on Digital Rights. So as Paradigm Initiative, we believe that if you have this document as an organization, as an individual, as a private citizen, an active one, as anybody, this is a document that is going to be very helpful to you. So we've also listed organizations which are present in the African, digital rights arena: Access Now, African Defenders, all those Article 19 Eastern Africa, and Article 19 West Africa, South Africa, and all that. The CC Hub, we have all those. We have CPESA, we have the Committee to Protect Journalists, we have Cybersecurity Africa, we have Defenders, Digital Security Alliance, and many other organizations which are there, including our very own Paradigm Initiative, and then policy, which are part of these discussions. So you will find a lot of information here. And then we've also listed what are the relevant digital rights events that happen in the continent, in different times of the year. So we have the Africa School on Internet Governance. We have, the CC Hub Digital Security Demo Day. We have Digital Rights and Inclusion Forum, our very own DRIF event. We actually had one in Nairobi and across the continent in April, and we postponed to July. We have the East Africa Cybersecurity Convention, which is an annual forum. We have the Forum on Internet Freedom in Africa, which is exactly this event we are speaking at. And we have regional initiatives and schools of internet governance, like the East Africa School of Internet Governance, and then we have the West Africa School of Internet Governance. And then we have those which are national, and such as the Kenya School of Internet Governance, Nigeria School of Internet Governance, South Sudan School of Internet Governance, Tanzania School of Internet Governance, and then lastly, we have the Arusha Women School of Internet Governance, where I spoke actually less than 2 weeks ago. So these events are contained in the AITA Digital Rights Toolkit, and you could go on and on. I mean, we've even highlighted in the AITA document, how do you draft a model coalition statement? Let's say there is an internet shutdown in Tanzania, for example, and then we want to respond as a coalition of East Africa digital rights organizations. How do we draft a coalition statement? So there is a model coalition statement which has been provided for there. So this document comes in handy, I mean, anytime, anywhere. We have statistics like 190 million mails are sent every minute in the world. Yeah, so that is all about AITA, and you can find more about the AITA Digital Rights Toolkit, as I told you, at aiata.africa. You can also get that at the Paradigm Initiative website, but of course it will redirect you to the same link I'm talking about. So this document, we have it in a print copy as a Paradigm Initiative. We have it both the PDF and then the hard copy, which we did distribute to some of our partners during the event we had in Senegal last week. So we've also gone to an extent of reducing this toolkit into a game. So there is the AITA game, which is being developed by our friends at Policy, in addition to the digital safety and all that. So we will have the AITA game. I mean, you go there, play the game, very interesting, and then you proceed. And that way, we hope that we are going to reach to many people, make them secure online, make sure, they have information about what events are where, which organizations can defend their rights. And we look forward to this, toolkit being, the next big thing as far as our digital security online is concerned. So thanks a lot. I will stop screen sharing for now, and then I will hand over to my colleague, Bulanda Ngawani, who I see is ready and sharp as always. Bulanda, over to you on reporting.
Thank you so much, Ekai. I seem to be having technical challenges with the sound on my PC, so you may notice that there's two of me. Hopefully I can use my PC to present and then of course to speak through my phone. May you please enable screen sharing? It says it's been disabled on your end. Or will I have to log out on my other device for it to kick in? Okay. Thank you so much. I hope that you can see my screen. So this morning, just to thank the previous speakers, Garnet, Ekai, thank you so much. It was interesting to listen to you both. So this morning I'll be speaking about reporting, so not so much of a presentation, but more of a conversation. And I hope that I'm audible enough. So to speak of reporting, so to start with, every African has the right to a safe online space. So Paradigm has developed this platform called Reporti. It's a new bilingual online platform that allows you to report digital rights violations and connects you with experts who can help seek justice. So I'm sure you're all wondering, why are we now speaking about digital rights violations and sort of moving away from digital security? I think we all know that digital security is interconnected with digital rights violations. Without digital security, violations arise, and then you need a platform, or you need avenues that can help you to seek justice. So to start off, just to briefly speak about Reporti. So Reporti, the word itself is a Swahili word that means to report. So we wanted a platform name, one that is very unique and one that is very, African and very sort of common in most of our African languages. I think if you say the word reporting, it sort of automatically signals, to report. So for us, we wanted that word to be, easily understandable and that we know is, present in most African languages. So moving along to why reporting. So with digital rights violations on the increase, or on the rise, rather, I'm just checking if my presentation has moved. Okay, so with digital rights violations on the increase and on the rise, we as Paradigm Initiative and our partners wanted to design a platform that would enable stakeholders and the public to report, document, track, and of course address digital rights violations on the continent. So Reporti was born as a result of this because it became clear that many violations, digital rights violations were happening on the continent. Many were going unreported, and we needed that platform or avenue where we could document them in such a way that also provides statistics that can address some of the limitations that we have in tackling these issues, especially when it comes to documentation and research, and really just to make a case for digital rights violations. Oftentimes we speak about digital rights violations are on the increase, but to what extent do we even have statistics? To what extent do we even know what sort of violations are happening in which countries, in which regions, and so on and so forth. So this platform is accessible to all stakeholders within the digital rights sectors, and for now, the Twitter public. And as I earlier mentioned, it's bilingual for now, so the platform is available in English and French. However, we're still exploring possibilities of having it available in other languages. I'm just trying to see if my presentation moved. Okay. Okay, So moving along, so essentially, the platform is accessible to all stakeholders, like I mentioned, and then we are looking to have more languages on board. But essentially, Reporti is an online platform that will enable stakeholders and the public to support a collaborative approach to digital rights violations in Africa, and particularly to addressing them. So the initiative, what we like to say, is the first of its kind in Africa. And a contribution, again, we believe that there are other innovative programs that are available, but we believe that Reporti is the first of its kind because, you know, it's bringing together everyone, all digital rights defenders and actors towards a common goal. So stakeholders and the public can use the platform to report violations. And then on the back end, so we connect victims to partners and experts who can then provide support for addressing the reported violations, and of course, provide the necessary justice. And also just to mention that all this information that is reported or provided on the platform is treated with the utmost confidentiality, and identities will not be made public. So just to emphasize that. So Reporti as a platform enables the public to report cases such as internet censorship, cyberbullying, online gender-based violence, illegal access or unauthorized access to user information, content abuse, and many other digital rights violations. So how it works is that you as the platform viewer, and that's the beauty of it. So on the front end, you're able to see the total number of reports made to date. You're able to see the number of verified cases. You can also further check by country or by region. And that's also very useful in terms of statistics, especially for research purposes, like I mentioned earlier. But also the platform enables a viewer to see the common types of violations per country. So at the end of the day, able to paint a picture of, you know, the prevalent types of violations on the continent, which countries or regions they're prevalent in, how many are being reported, and so on and so forth. So how the platform works is that once the report is made and received on our end, we're able to document it to verify, is this indeed true? So if someone today reports and says, okay, there's an internet shutdown in Uganda. So at the same time, we process it, and then assign it to a case resolution committee. So these are the most suitable and willing organizations that we have partnered with for addressing the violations, and in other cases, collaborate with other coalitions, for example. Pardon me. And just to mention a bit about the stakeholders. So we have advocacy organizations, human rights organizations, digital rights organizations, researchers, organizations involved in strategic litigation, so mostly lawyers, lawyers' hubs, and we've also made provision for national human rights institutions in our countries, as well as the Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights. So what else do we hope to achieve with Reporti? Well, ultimately, besides it being a platform for reporting, documentation, and addressing digital rights violations on the continent, the platform will help educate more people about what constitutes a digital rights violation. But at the same time, you know, it helps shed light on the importance of documenting and reporting these cases. But lastly, also, we hope that with Reporti, we can form a community of defenders who can then lean on each other and each other's resources to address digital rights violations on the continent, and of course, provide evidence for advocacy and engaging with policymakers. So with that said, so while Paradigm Initiative and a few other partners developed Reporti, what we hope at the end of the day is that everyone can come on board. So I'm going to post some details in the chat section. Okay, so what we are hoping for is that everyone can come on board. My presentation keeps disappearing. Yeah, so we're hoping that everyone can come on board and partner with this platform. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a collaborative approach. It's not a paradigm initiative platform, but we want it to be a space where we collaborate with different actors, different organizations in addressing digital rights violations, because we also recognize that we can't do this work on our own. We need to rely on each other's strength. So partner strength, stakeholder strength. So you can access the platform on reporty.africa. So for any inquiries, please email reporty@paradigmhq.org, but also to register to be in the steering committee or the resolutions committee, please so use the Google Sheet that I've posted in the chat to sign up. So you can sign up as an individual, as an organization. So I have the details on that slide. I hope that everyone can see them or at least access them in the chat section. I would encourage you to sign up. But also just to briefly look at some of the violations that I spoke about that can be reported on the platform. So it's not just these violations, but many others. And that's why I encourage you to visit the URL. So that's reporty.africa. And that's it. I had prepared a video on how one can make a report. I don't know if we still have enough time, but I could quickly share that. But perhaps before we go to the video, just to mention that, so I spoke about the steering committee and the case resolutions committee. So on the back end, we've created two committees. Like I mentioned, collaborative approach. So how do you get involved? Or if you do get involved, where do you, see yourself functioning? So the steering committee is really a case manager from Paradigm Initiative, who's just the dedicated case manager, handles all the communication between the victim and of course ourselves as resolvers, just for privacy reasons. And the case manager works alongside dedicated officers from partner organizations. So you could sign up to be part of that steering committee and dedicate one officer from your end. So really the job of this committee is day-to-day admin of the platform, also to provide leadership on and the management, on the platform overall, but also just to provide leadership on how it evolves over time. So if today we want to translate reporting to many other languages, how do we make that decision? Of course, it has to be made by the steering committee. So really just looking at how the platform evolves from what it is currently. Then in terms of the case resolution committee, so this is the committee, like I mentioned, we have human rights and advocacy organizations, we have the lawyers, we have our local human rights commissions, and in adverse cases, we have provision where you can escalate to the Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights. So this case resolution committee is the committee essentially that helps to solve and address these cases. So they provide all the necessary support, based on their organizational strength, as I had earlier mentioned. So if the case requires litigation, then we, hand it over to the lawyers. If it's a digital security issue, then we hand it over to the digital security experts. Does it require, advocacy, counseling, and so on and so forth. So that's it. Let me see if I can present my video on how one can make a report. I had challenges with my audio, but I hope it works. Okay, there we go. Information on the right side and the bottom. Thank you so much. So basically that's it about reporting. Garnet, I now hand over back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that presentation on AITA and reporting. And so for this next, stage of our session, I will be inviting our panelists to kind of introduce themselves just shortly before we start off. And I think we have Sandra, Cecilia, and you can introduce yourself in that order. I know I introduced you before, but just to like before they, yeah. And then we'll also have Bulanda and Ekai on the panel too. But yes, Sandra, you can go ahead and just introduce yourself first.
Thank you very much, Bernette. Hello, everyone. I'm very much happy to be part of this space and this interesting conversation, especially now in these times of COVID-19, where almost all our interactions are relegated online. I'm called Sandra Kucheriza, and my day job is with AITA, which is a feminist organization led by young women advocating for the digital rights and internet freedoms for minority women. And our focus as AITA is on lesbians, bisexual and queer women, and female sex workers. So we work in several thematic areas, and you can head over to herinternet.org, which is our website, to find more details. And you can also check out our social media pages on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under AITA for more details. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much. Cecilia?
Good morning. I'm Cecilia Mound. My background is in media. I've been in the internet space for the last 4 years. I now work for Localization Lab, where I'm the community lead. At Localization Lab, we localize tools and different resources, internet freedom tools into different languages, trying to bring inclusivity and making sure that people who don't speak English are not left out. Yes, and I'm glad to be here.
And I think one fun fact is that Cecilia has written so much about online gender-based violence in Kenya, and I really cited her a lot for my dissertation. So thank you so much for your work, Cecilia.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, and our other panelists are Bulanda and Ekai. Do you want to reintroduce yourself, or should I just start off with the questions?
Yeah, I think you can start off with the questions, and then maybe Bulanda can introduce herself briefly. I don't know, because I didn't really.
Yeah, you didn't introduce her.
Okay, I kind of must have skipped that part. Okay, so I'm Bulanda Nkowani, and I'm the program officer for Southern Africa under Paradigm Initiative. So I lead all the work in all Southern African countries, and I'm speaking to you from Lusaka, Zambia. Excited to be here. Excited
to have you. Okay, so one thing, sorry. I think one thing we can notice about our panelists is that we have such a very wide and diverse set of people. And so my first question is, what are some of the key digital security or digital rights violations that you are noticing in your line of work? Something that maybe other people may not see. And so we're just going to go in the order that people introduce themselves in, if that's okay.
All right. In my line of work, some of the key digital security issues, this is Sandra, some of the key digital security issues, in addition to the usual, threats of violence and cybercrime, hacking and all that, it's really been that there is no localization of solutions as a very big issue for us. So yes, there is all these problems, but as we're trying to find solutions, it's very hard to find solutions that are really made for Uganda, firstly, and then for Africa. or regionally. So that's been one of our key issues. And obviously there is variations in the digital literacy of beneficiaries. So for the communities that I work with, which is the LGBT communities, it's very hard. It's quite a challenge to communicate the technical concepts of digital security to communities of people who have variations in the digital literacy levels and so on. But some of the key issues that have come up have been issues around online violence. Online violence in relation to digital security has been on the rise, especially in the past couple of years of COVID-19 and the pandemic and all that. And some of these violations online include blackmail, threats of violence, obviously rape and death threats. But also it is very hard to keep up with the rapid developments in technology, because I think over the past couple of years, every day we wake up, there is a new app or a new site or a new software that is doing so and so, such and such a thing. So it's really hard to keep up with the rapid developments in technology, especially because the technology companies aren't really thinking about the end users' best interests. Yeah, thank you very much.
Am I next?
I guess.
Okay. Oh, okay. You can proceed.
Oh, well, some of the digital rights issues that I've seen, especially in my field, is misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation. We moved from the era of information to misinformation. There's a lot of what we call online violence, different types of online violence. And because most of the targets of this kind of violence and digital rights issue are women with voices, women politicians, journalists, and just human rights defenders. So another thing we also notice is on our end, because sometimes it takes two to tango, we feel like sometimes we need also to keep up updated, to be updated with different information, different technologies, because every day there's something new to learn. And the more you learn, the more safer you are on the online platform. But you can't sit on the comfort zone and talk about digital rights when you're also not taking a step. So it's both ways. As much as there are a lot of digital rights violation, also what are we doing when it comes to this violation? What are we doing to be able to counter attack these violations? Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, so I think at Paradigm Initiative in our work, we've experienced quite a number of these violations and challenges, which we've either being reported to us through our platforms and our work and our networks, and also the things we see around the countries we work. So one of them, of course, is the abuse of the internet to to spread fake news. I mean, fake news is okay. Yes, so fake news is something that is becoming a bit of a challenge because like we had this in Uganda when the president issued an order that we can't have people abusing the internet, and therefore he did order the security forces to arrest people who are kind of including one user who killed Museveni online. I mean, like, the president is dead when it was not true. So the president did say that there has to be a crackdown on such fake news. So which really brings a challenge to those who are for a server internet and for the internet to be accessible to everybody. Let's allow people to access the internet. You know, it's much as we advocate for people accessing the internet and using it. There is also the matter of internet shutdowns, which is becoming very common in Africa. We have seen this across the continent. And sometimes you look at the statistics and you get very shocked that, you know, Ethiopia, for instance, in 2019 alone, on the internet 8 times. But
I think you might have lost.
Okay, so maybe I can go. I see Ekai seems to be having network challenges. So to speak to some of the digital rights and security violations that we've been witnessing. So mainly 3. So I would speak like just to build upon what Ekai said. So misinformation, online gender-based violence, and of course, online financial fraud. And I'll attribute these to COVID-19, you know, a time when everyone was relying on digital tools and platforms, you know, for day-to-day life. So you find that, you know, of course, lots of misinformation, fake news about, you know, different things. So COVID-19 itself and other news items, but also a lot of online gender-based violence, because, you know, a lot of women now were turning to the online platforms to express themselves, and then they would experience cyberbullying. But also we see a lot of online financial fraud, naturally, because, you know, we're all relying on the online financial solutions that are available. But also maybe just to touch on some of the major challenges that we witnessed, I'd say so far, there's like a huge lack of awareness, especially when it comes to issues of personal digital security. For lack of a better term, there's some sort of lack of seriousness that people don't tend to attach to personal digital security. So, you know, there's so much emphasis on physical security, whereas, you know, everyone's accessing, you know, online platforms are all using digital devices, but there's really no understanding of some of the vulnerabilities that come with this access. So you find that people, you know, from very basic things, in terms of people would still use very weak and obvious passwords. You know, you will write your you have a tiny notebook where you write all your, you know, delicate passwords. People still click on unknown links, you know, plugging their flash drives into, you know, different devices anyhow. So really, I think also the other bigger challenge has been lack of awareness on digital security and hygiene.
Thank you so much. And I definitely understand what you're saying about the lack of awareness on different digital security measures that one can take. And I think that can lead me to my next question, which is, you know, what Bulanda talks about, the lack of seriousness on this matter. I think we all represent CSOs, and we are working within a gap where governments are not dealing with digital rights violations and digital security violations, and tech companies are also not dealing with it as much, especially in African markets, right? And so we have this gap that CSOs are trying to fill. And I'm wondering, like, how is it working, especially for somebody like Sandra? You work with LGBTQ people in a country where this is criminalized. So how do you navigate working within this gap where people cannot report to the government and also cannot really get help from tech companies on these issues?
It's obviously very challenging. It's very challenging because apart from the policy gaps or the legislation and the legal environment that makes it hard for us to do the work, it's also very hard to get to the beneficiaries because the risks of, the chances of having physical security issues when they are coming, probably when they are coming for training workshops, or when, you know, for whatever reason, if we have to meet to solve a data security issue, these services from even safe spaces or safe organizations like her internet. So it's really a challenge. But how we've been able to navigate that is by maintaining and building strategic partnerships, you know. I'm not sure, Garnet, if you're aware, but her internet has been a very, very big partner of policy, for example. So policy can access spaces that perhaps her internet wouldn't be able to because of the kind of people that we serve or the people that we work with, you know. So having those kind of partnerships also helps a lot. Cecilia and I have actually met, and the first time we met was through a space organized by Defenders. So you can imagine that's how we, you know, keep on navigating the difficult legislation, the difficult policy gaps, but also the difficult conversations of involving the general mainstream society in solutions. So really it's been around harnessing the power of working together, different actors coming on to help us. High Internet, for example, is part of the Digital Security Alliance that I think Akai mentioned as part of their partners as Paradigm and all that. So through these partnerships, we are able to access spaces, and our beneficiaries are also able to access spaces that would have been previously difficult to get into. But as in addition to the spaces, it also comes down to the technical resources as well. You know, the information, the training materials, the reading materials, resources, for example, the digital safety that has been developed by policy, resources that I didn't even know about, such as the AITA, you know, toolkit and stuff by Paradigm. So just sort of pinging onto partnerships, pinging onto movements, pinging onto alliances that can help us access spaces and resources that otherwise being difficult to access in such a political, legal, and social environment. Yes. Obviously, there's also like working at a regional level, working with like representatives of these tech companies, for example, the Facebook office in South Africa and all that, you know, trying to find ways of how can we get solutions that are not necessarily tied down to the political. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, if I may. So in the case of Paradigm Initiative, so as Ekai had earlier mentioned, so, you know, we work in two streams, digital inclusion and of course, digital rights advocacy. So, you know, with our digital inclusion stream of work, of course, we have, you know, we teach practical skills, you know, digital security masterclass. So for us, it's how, you know, we are, you know, aiming to fill that gap. And of course, most of the other policy work that goes into it. But also, I would say, you know, reporting AITA, you know, brilliant ideas of how, you know, we sought to fill that gap. You know, just being able to provide the tools that would then, you know, enhance digital security, you know, across the board. But at the same time, also awareness raising on our part, you know, basic things. How do you identify a digital security issue? You know, where can you seek justice? How do you, you know, where do you find, you know, the tools and platforms where you can report whatever issue you're faced with, but also just borrowing from the earlier speaker, also leveraging on stakeholders, because, you know, we cannot do the work alone. So leveraging on stakeholders. And for us, reporting and AITA have been very important, and particularly I'll speak about reporting because we believe, you know, it provides the necessary justice and redress for digital rights violations or digital security violations that one may be faced with. Of course, through the different stakeholder groups that we have provided. So that's how, for us, well, it's a small contribution, but at least, you know, for us, you know, we believe that these tools, to some extent, will help to fill that gap. And also, I think the beauty of using tools is that it's, most times I think this is a very creative venture, even when you look at digital safety. Oftentimes we produce a toolkit, it's a book, I give it to you and I expect you to read it. But sometimes that's not so practical, but I think having used, creative ways of doing so, we believe that eventually people will use these tools and they'll get the necessary knowledge that they require. Thank you.
Right, and just as a follow-up, Bulanda, sorry, before Cecilia goes, somebody in the chat, Furaha Songa, had a question on whether Reporti was working at the national or continental or international level. If you could shed more light on that.
Okay, so how Reporti, it works at the national and continental level. So Paradigm Initiative, of course, is partnering with different organizations across the continent. So if a violation today happens here in Zambia, naturally, it will have to come to a case manager that's within, Southern Africa, or someone close to you. And then within our partners, we then search further to see who is based in Zambia that can follow up this case firsthand. So really, it's a continental approach, but at the same time, we are establishing roots at the national level because we need to have people on ground that can actually be with you within your jurisdiction and help you to solve whatever case it is that you have been faced with. But also, I think local context is also very important to have. And so that's why also even at the national level, we have involved stakeholders. I hope that answers the question.
Sorry, Cecilia, we can't hear you.
Okay, I think, first of all, I just want to build up on what Sandra said. She talked about we need solutions that don't include a lot of political goodwill, which is true, because sometimes we find that most of our digital rights issues are also they are born out of issues with politics. So if we are to get a solution out of it, especially in this part of the sub-Saharan Africa, we need to find solutions that are parallel to us needing goodwill. And also when it comes to the issue of policies, we also need to know to make it so inclusive, because I think we assume a lot of people are educated. When you come to Nairobi, you assume that everyone is educated. But what about the majority of the population that lives in the rural areas that we need to, for them to be online? We need them to be part of this digital platform so that they can be able to reap what we call the digital dividend. So what are we doing about it? What are organizations doing about it? What are civil society doing about it? Another thing I would say, it's very commendable that we have Reporti, we have T, we have AITA, because we are seeing resources that are being produced for people who look like us, for women who look like us, because in the past we've been just using resources from the different parts of the world. They're talking about our problems and they don't go through those problems. But now we are talking about our problems. We are giving solutions to the problems because we have experienced the problems and we know what we need to take care of the problem. Thank you.
Right. I really relate to what you're saying about making our own resources that make sense to our context and our situations, especially as Africans. We always have people speaking over us, over our own issues. So it does feel quite empowering to have our own self-led tools, which leads me to my next question. There's something about the online space right now. I think Sandra touched on it, where every day there's a new tool to navigate and a new tool being used to inflict harm on people. And also this also just makes digital security hard. You have tech companies making it even hard to delete an account. We saw that recently in Afghanistan, where women were trying to delete their accounts, and it was such a difficult process and people had to have toolkits. And so how do you think technology companies can contribute to making digital security more accessible to everyone? Sorry.
Okay. All right. So I think tech companies need to be more proactive as opposed to the users first crying and banging on doors and, having all these violations before they can make a move. For example, you know what Apple did with their recent iOS updates, where they allow the end user to decide whether they give an app permission to track their activities or not. So by Apple being proactive in such updates, it means that even for the end user who did not know that apps were tracking their data in certain ways, can now be able to, to understand, first of all, the concept behind tracking of data, but also to then make the decision to decide whether they want to give that app that permission or not. So for me, tech companies should take should do such things more often, where they are proactive before the user has to request for that. We all know how the report buttons on several sites came about. Facebook didn't have a report button for so long. Twitter equally took forever to even get a report button after Facebook had. So, but all that was because the users themselves actually asked for those measures to be put in place to make those platforms safer to navigate, especially for women, and human rights defenders and other accounts that are very visible on particular platforms. So for me, I think tech companies need to be more proactive as opposed to first waiting for the users to request for these things, because the tech companies know what they are doing. When they are creating all these sites, when they are creating all these beautiful platforms that we use to network and get opportunities and get information on a daily, they know exactly what they want to do at the end of the day. But they shouldn't be doing certain negative things, for example, mining data without the end user knowing, using that data and selling it to third parties or using it with other third parties. So basically, they need to be more proactive about certain things, because there are also very many things that are hidden on the back end that the end users may not be aware of, that are negative to us. So I think tech companies need to be proactive. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have to first be taken to court or to that assembly thing that the Americans, their parliament or whatever, for him to be sorry about what the company does. They need to be proactive before any legislation or any end user comes out to say, hey, look, this is not working for us anymore. If we remember a couple of years ago, there was that story on Facebook where an underage South Sudanese girl was being auctioned off for marriage by her parents. Yes, on Facebook, and this was a very public space that anyone who had access to that account or who knew that account or who even searched for it could see this information. And human rights defenders and digital rights activists in South Sudan and the region came out to tell Facebook that, you know what, we've reported this account several times. Why aren't you taking it down? This content is very harmful, not only for this one particular woman or girl, but for others like her, whom we may not get to hear about ever, But Facebook came out to take down the post and even suspend the account weeks after the girl had been auctioned off and married off to a very, very old guy, for a few heads of cattle and stuff. So for me, tech companies really need to be proactive, not to first wait for the user to say, this is not working for us anymore. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. On my end, I would first say that we need to acknowledge that these tech companies are in business. Their main concern is money. They didn't make that so that you can share information. They made it so that they can get money. It's the same way we say in media here in Kenya, these media owners are in business. Anything that brings sensationalism, they're in for it because it puts them on top of the chart. So that is one thing we have to acknowledge. And when we acknowledge that, then we know that we have a responsibility to push this tech company. For example, just the other day in the light of the Gender Equality Forum in Paris, where TikTok and Twitter and I think Facebook decided that they are going to stand firm and protect women, young girls, and the minority groups on their online platform because they had been pushed to do that. So I feel also these tech companies need a force. Different stakeholders need to come on board and be able to put pressure on them to be able to protect minority groups on their platform. And second of all, as I was saying, we also need to be on the know on what is happening to be able to protect ourselves. Because as much as it sounds like an overrated cliche, if it's free, you're the product. So when you're on those online platforms, just know you're the product. Don't even lie to yourself. And Facebook or Twitter doesn't care about you. They're there because they need to make money. So how are you taking, what role are you playing to protect yourself? And also there's a point I need to add. When it comes to creating these resources like Reporting and Team, we also need to ask ourselves one question. Why is it that we don't have enough resources from the Global South? Is it because we are practicing imposter syndrome, that we believe anything from the West is better than what we produce? Second of all, is it that we don't have enough resources to produce these resources? Then what can be done about it? Those are the things that we need to ask ourselves, because if we go on like this, we are going to lose the voice of the next generation, because we need them to come up and find these resources that have been created by people that like them for them. Thank you.
If I may add to what Cecilia and Sandra have spoken about, again, just to reiterate, the tech companies need to be proactive. So in as much as they're trying to be proactive in investing in digitally secure platforms and technologies, also in raising awareness in terms of the vulnerabilities that are associated with their platforms, where we empower users in a way that they can avoid any challenges that they may face or encounter as they use, your platform, but also to just anticipate some of these digital security or digital rights challenges. But more importantly, I think in terms of providing reporting lines or reporting measures, where one can use them to seek help, one shouldn't have to over navigate your site, just to find that, help button or, whatever help that they need, but also just being able to customize some of these tabs or buttons. I think we all know that we all have very different needs. Children have different needs. Women online on some of these platforms, we have very different needs. So really just also being able to customize those tabs, and also especially for human rights defenders or human rights work, it's a very tricky field. You can't approach all these online platforms the way an ordinary internet user would. So really, I think emphasis again, to borrow from Sandra, is tech companies need to be very proactive, especially in how they provide and place some of these solutions within their platforms and sites, but at the same time being able to customize solutions to different stakeholder groups. Thank you.
Right, and even with customizing, also just making all their policies more accessible. Like, why does it have to be a written report? Why can't it be in a video form that anybody can read, especially for people who can't read? And even Facebook has this whole resource center for women, but why isn't it available in other forms? I think just making all their resources accessible. I think I'm going to invite Otavia, I'm so sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, to ask a question. You are raising your hand. Are you available to ask your question? Or anyone else who still wants to ask a question, you can just raise your hand and I'll permit you to ask your question at this point. Okay. I guess I'd want to. Oh, okay. Okay, maybe you could type your question in the chat if that's okay. Yeah. Okay, as they type the question, I think I'd want us to end the panel on a positive note. So what are you hopeful for in the digital rights and digital security space, especially for Africans in the next few years?
there's very many things to be hopeful for, but also very many things to be grateful for where we are at it. I think it's a plus and it's a positive thing that digital safety and security is getting such visibility, for lack of a better word. Because if there is a few years ago, digital security and safety was left to the IT people at work and those people who own tech companies or people who own companies that, I don't know, write proposals and do research stuff for people. But right now, digital security has been
kind of lost you a little, Sandra.
made they are realized how important it is to be safe if they are. Oh, sorry. So what
Maybe Cecilia can go next as Sandra tries to reconnect.
Okay, thank you. I think what I'm hopeful, first of all, is us taking our rightful place on the digital platform. We still can't be talking about gender inequality in the next 5 years. You know, we need to bridge the digital divide, the gender digital divide. We need more women online. We need more minority groups online. What I'm hopeful is security and safe spaces will continue taking shape, and we will not be talking about the same issue that people are scared of the online platform because of the issue of being violated online. Another thing, when we also talk about the digital gender divide, we also need to talk about digital skills. You know, about the woman who is in the village, are they able to use, you know, when you talk about the internet, how do you bring them into the conversation if they don't have digital skills? So what are we doing to bring more people on board? So I'm expecting that things like this are going to be put on the table and solutions are going to be found. And also we need to put our governments accountable. We cannot keep talking about internet shutdown. So what are we going to do to make sure that the internet is free from the government? And I know it sounds impossible, but there is nothing impossible if a solution can be able to be found. Thank you.
Okay, what are we hoping for? So it's quite a lot to hope for, but maybe to narrow it down. So seeing enactment of more human rights respecting legislation across the continent, that would be very, very encouraging. Also seeing a lot more stakeholders coming on board, because at the end of the day, I believe, you know, our ICT policies and legislation should capture the needs of all. Lastly, seeing a reduction in digital rights or digital security violations. Of course, hoping that tools like AITA reporting and digital safety would contribute to that. Thank you.
Sandra, you can go ahead since you were cut off.
Yes, apologies for my network. So I was saying I'm very hopeful for where the digital rights space is going, because if we've noticed, there's a lot of new legislation in several African countries around the use of the internet, the use of other ICTs and all that. As much as there's a political connotation to it or behind all these legislations, it means that more people who are not exactly tech activists or people who studied tech at school or whatever are going to be interested in digital security and safety and how ICTs actually impact their lives at the end of the day. So for me, I'm very hopeful because this couple of years and where we are going, it's going to be all hands on deck. It won't just be particular CSOs working on particular issues. It won't just be the tech companies. It won't just be governments that are in this fight. It's going to be everyone's fight. Because if we remember a few months ago when the Nigerian government shut down Twitter, Nigerians were actually working hand in hand with Ugandans on social media platforms to agitate for the Nigerian government to open up Twitter. Why? because they know Ugandans empathize with them. Because in Uganda, for us during election time, it is been normalized by our government to shut down the internet and remove access to certain platforms. For example, even right now, ever since January 2021 to date, in Uganda, Facebook is still blocked. If you don't have a VPN, you can't access it. So for me, the collaboration between the Nigerians and the Ugandans then showed me that there is so much hope for the rest of us and for the rest of Africa to agitate for their individual digital rights, as opposed to just letting this be the work of particular CSOs or particular individuals who are passionate about this. So I'm very hopeful that there is a positive, we are going in a positive direction in terms of everyone being able to know and understand exactly what their digital rights and internet freedoms look like, in our different contexts. Thank you very much.
Right. And I think for me, I'm hopeful for more creative projects to make digital safety tips more accessible to everyone. And I think this leads us to the end of our panel. We're right on time. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much to our panelists for shedding light and introducing and presenting different tools that we can access. You can follow Paradigm Initiative, High Internet Localization Lab, and Policy on Twitter and LinkedIn to keep up with all our different work on digital security. And thank you so much for attending, and I hope you all have a beautiful day.